The space station called Kepler Station was huge. It floated in the dark space between stars like a giant metal wheel. Inside the station, there was a big round room where important meetings happened. This room was called the Galactic Council Chambers. Today, the room was full of aliens from 12 different worlds. The aliens looked very different from each other. Some were tall and made of crystal that sparkled in the light. Others looked like giant bugs with many arms and legs. There were fish-like creatures in water tanks, and some aliens that looked like they were made of metal and wires. Each group sat in their own special area of the big room. In the middle of the room, 3 humans stood together. They looked very small compared to most of the aliens around them. The humans had traveled a very long way from Earth to be here. They wanted their planet to join the group of alien worlds called the Galactic Alliance. Captain Jake Morrison was the leader of the human group. He wore a clean blue uniform with shiny buttons. He was nervous but tried not to show it. Next to him stood Dr. Lisa Carter. She was a smart woman who knew a lot about space and science. She held a small computer that had all the papers Earth needed to join the Alliance. The third human was Lieutenant Ben Walsh. He was young and this was his first trip to meet aliens. Captain Morrison looked around the big room. He had dreamed of this day for years. Earth had worked so hard to get ready for this meeting. They had built new spaceships, learned new languages, and studied alien cultures. Now it was time to see if all that work would pay off. A tall crystal alien stood up from his seat. His name was Vorthok, and he spoke for the Zephyrian people. When he talked, his voice came through a machine that changed his crystal sounds into words the humans could understand. Before we think about letting humans join us, Vorthok said, we need to talk about some problems. Your people have a bad history of fighting and war. Captain Morrison straightened his back and tried to look confident. Honored aliens, he said in a loud, clear voice, it is true that humans have had wars in the past, but we have also learned to work together and solve problems without fighting. We want to be peaceful members of your alliance. Suddenly, strange clicking and buzzing sounds came from the section where the bug-like aliens sat. Through the translation machine, their words sounded mean and mocking. Peaceful, said their leader, whose name was hard for humans to say. Your stories tell about warriors who could beat whole armies by themselves. You have tales of people who could never be stopped. These violent stories show what your people are really like. Dr. Carter stepped forward. She felt she needed to help explain. Those are just old stories meant to teach people to be brave and never give up. Every world has stories like that about heroes from long ago. But the fish-like aliens in their water tanks began to glow with patterns of light. This was how they talked. The translation machine turned their light patterns into words. We have looked at your movies and books. They said, you have many stories about lone fighters who beat impossible enemies. You tell tales about soldiers who never surrender, about people who fight against huge armies. These are not stories about peace. These stories make fighting look good. Around the room, more and more aliens began to agree. They made different sounds and lights that all meant the same thing. They did not trust humans. They thought humans were too violent to join the alliance. The metal aliens, who called themselves the Mechanical Collective, spoke in flat, emotionless voices. Our computers have studied your stories. They show that a species with such violent heroes would be dangerous to peace in the galaxy. Captain Morrison felt sick. Earth had spent so many years getting ready for this day. They had sent their best people and their best ideas, but now it looked like their own stories and legends were going to be used against them. The very tales that made humans proud were making the aliens afraid. Lieutenant Walsh whispered to the captain, Sir, maybe we should tell them about our peaceful stories too. But Captain Morrison could see it in the aliens' faces and sounds and lights. They had already made up their minds. They were going to say no. Earth would not be allowed to join the Galactic Alliance. The insectoid leader clicked again. These humans worship violence. Their greatest heroes are all warriors and fighters. How can we trust them to keep peace among the stars? Dr. Carter tried one more time. Please understand, these stories are not about worshiping violence. They are about good people who stood up to protect others. They teach us that sometimes we must be brave to help those who cannot help themselves. But the crystal alien Vorthok was shaking his head, making tiny ringing sounds. Dr. Carter, your people have legends about individuals who can defeat armies, about humans who never give up fighting, no matter what. These stories show that your species thinks violence is the answer to problems. The metal alien spoke again. Analysis complete. Humans show 97.3% probability of causing conflicts if admitted to alliance. Recommendation: reject application. Captain Morrison opened his mouth to try to argue more, but he could feel that it was hopeless. The aliens had looked at humanity's greatest stories and seen only violence. They had looked at tales of courage and seen only war. They did not understand what these stories really meant to humans. The room was getting louder as more aliens joined in criticizing humanity. Some made angry buzzing sounds. Others flashed bright warning colors. The metal ones just repeated their computer calculations about how dangerous humans would be. Dr. Carter felt tears starting in her eyes, but she tried not to let them show. Earth had hoped for this day for so long. Children had dreamed of meeting friendly aliens. Scientists had imagined sharing knowledge with beings from other worlds. But now it all seemed to be falling apart because of stories about heroes and warriors. Lieutenant Walsh looked at his two leaders and saw how sad they were becoming. He had studied alien cultures, and he knew that once the council made up their mind, it was very hard to change it. It looked like humanity would remain alone in the galaxy. The noise in the room was getting louder and louder. Aliens were arguing among themselves about whether humans were dangerous. Some seemed to think humans might attack other species. Others worried that human warriors might try to take over the Alliance. Captain Morrison felt the weight of his whole planet on his shoulders. Every human back on Earth was counting on him and his team. They had sent their best diplomats, their smartest scientists, and their most peaceful representatives. But none of it seemed to matter. Just as the captain was about to make one last desperate speech, something unexpected happened. A new voice cut through all the noise and argument. It was a deep, strong voice that made everyone in the room stop talking at once. Perhaps, the voice said calmly, you should listen to one of their legends before you judge them. Every alien in the room turned to look toward where the voice had come from. Captain Morrison turned to wondering who had spoken up for humanity when everything seemed lost. In all the confusion and disappointment, he had forgotten that there were other beings in the room who were not part of the council itself. The voice had come from the observer section, where important aliens could watch the meetings, but not usually speak. Someone there had decided to break the rules and speak up for Earth. But who was it? And why did their voice make all the other aliens suddenly become so quiet and still? The whole room became completely silent. It was so quiet that Captain Morrison could hear his own heartbeat. Every single alien in the big chamber turned to look at where the voice had come from. Even the machines that helped aliens breathe seemed to get quiet. Slowly, a huge figure stood up from the shadows in the observer section. The being was enormous, much bigger than any human. He was almost 3 meters tall, which made him look like a giant. His body was covered in what looked like living armor that changed colors like oil spilled on water. The armor seemed to move and shift by itself. The alien skin was covered with many scars. Some scars were small, others were big and deep. They told the story of countless battles and fights, but it was his eyes that made Captain Morrison feel strange. They were not cruel or angry eyes. Instead, they looked tired, like someone who had seen too much sadness and fighting in his long life. Commander Kelthus whispered the crystal alien Vorthok as he said the name. His crystal body actually became dimmer, like a light that was losing power. Captain Morrison could tell that Vorthok was afraid, even though he tried to hide it. Lieutenant Walsh leaned close to Captain Morrison and whispered, "Sir, who is that?" Dr. Carter had studied many alien species before coming to the meeting. She knew exactly who this was, and it made her feel both hopeful and scared at the same time. "That's Commander Kelthos," she whispered back. "He's the most famous warrior in the entire galaxy." Kelthos belonged to a species called the Dominion. His people were known as the best fighters among all the alien races. They were strong, fast, and very good at fighting. But even among his own warrior people, Kelthos was special. He was considered the greatest fighter who had ever lived. For 50 years, Kelthos had served as a neutral observer in the Galactic Council. This meant he could watch the meetings but was not supposed to take sides or give opinions. His job was just to make sure that meetings stayed peaceful. Most aliens were so afraid of him that they would not start fights when he was around. I have stayed quiet for many years, Kelthos said as he began walking down from the observer section. His voice was deep and strong, but he did not need to shout. Everyone could hear him perfectly. But I cannot sit here and say nothing while you make fun of something you do not understand. The bug-like aliens began clicking nervously. Their leader spoke through the translation machine. Commander, surely you cannot support a species that loves violence the way these humans do. As Kelthos walked toward the center of the room, Captain Morrison noticed something very interesting. Even though the alien warrior looked scary and dangerous, he moved very carefully. His steps were controlled and gentle, like someone who was trying not to break things. Here was a being who had learned to control great power. You talk about their legends like they are the only species that has such stories, Kelthos said as he reached the center of the chamber. But every species in this room has tales of great warriors. The difference is that you have forgotten what your own legends really mean. The glowing aliens called ethereals began pulsing with angry colors. Our old stories teach wisdom and peace, one of them said. Do they? Kelthos asked, looking around at all the different alien groups. Let me remind you of your own heroes. He turned to face the crystal aliens first. The Zephyrians tell stories about Shardmel, who stood alone against the crystal plague that was killing his people. He saved them all through strength of will and refusing to give up. Vorthok's crystal body flickered with surprise. How did this warrior know their old stories so well? Kelthos turned to the fish-like aliens in their water tanks. The aquatics have legends about Deep-Sing Athalassa, who fought the terrible Abyss spawn in the deepest parts of their ocean. She battled these monsters alone to protect her people. The aquatic aliens' light patterns changed to show confusion and surprise. The mechanical collective tells the story of Cortafenda Prime. Kelthos continued, looking at the robot-like beings. He protected the data vaults against the chaos virus that tried to destroy all their knowledge and memories. One by one, Kelthos went around the room, telling each species about their own legendary heroes. Captain Morrison watched in amazement as the great warrior seemed to know the ancient stories of every single alien race present. These are not different from human legends, Kelthos said when he had finished. They are stories about individuals who stood against terrible odds when everything looked hopeless. They are about people who refused to give up when giving up would have been easier. The question is not whether humans have such stories. The question is whether they understand what these stories really mean. Dr. Carter found her courage to speak. What do you think they mean, Commander? For the first time since he had entered the center of the chamber, Kelthos' expression became a little softer. He looked at the three humans with something that might have been respect. They mean that when darkness comes, when all hope seems lost, when the easy thing to do is to give up, there will be some people who choose to stand and fight, he said. Not because they love violence, but because they are needed. The metal aliens made worry and clicking sounds as they processed this information. Explanation requested. How do violent stories create peaceful behavior? Kelthos turned to face the mechanical collective. Your own Cortafenda Prime used combat programs to destroy the chaos virus. Did he not? Did he achieve peace by surrendering to the virus or by fighting against it? The robot aliens' lights flickered as they thought about this. The situation was different. Their spokesman finally said, how was it different? Kelthos pressed them. Because the enemy was a computer virus instead of a living creature. Because the stakes were the survival of your entire species instead of conquest of new territory. The robot alien could not give a good answer to this question. Kelthos looked around the room at all. The aliens, the humans understand something that you have forgotten during your years of comfortable peace. They understand that there are some things worth fighting for and some things worth dying for. The fish-like aquatic aliens made their light patterns glow with skeptical colors. You speak as if you have studied human culture very carefully, Commander. I have, Kelthos replied simply. For 5 years, ever since their application was first submitted to this council, I have been watching them. I have studied their responses to problems, their treatment of those who are weaker than themselves, and their choices when faced with difficult moral decisions. This was a surprise to everyone in the room, including the humans. Dr. Carter stepped forward. "What did you see when you watched us?" "Commander, I saw something that impressed me," Kelthus said. "I watched when the mining colony on Titan had a terrible accident with their life support system. The other human colonies could have simply evacuated their own people and left the miners to die. Instead, they sent rescue ships into a dangerous radiation field. They risked the lives of hundreds of people to save just a few dozen miners. They did not do this for money or advantage. They did it because they believed that no one should be left behind to die." The chamber was completely quiet now. Every alien was listening carefully to what the great warrior was saying. "I also watched when your research station on Europa discovered a new form of life in the ice," Kelthos continued. "They could have kept this discovery secret and used it for their own benefit. Instead, they immediately established rules to protect the new life forms. Then they invited scientists from 6 other species to join their research, sharing their discovery freely with everyone." Captain Morrison felt proud but also confused. "Commander, how do you know about these events? They were not part of our official application paper." Kelthos looked directly at the human captain. His scarred face showed what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Because I was there for both events. I have been testing your species for 5 years, creating situations where you had to choose between helping yourselves and helping others. Every single time, you chose to help others." This news sent shocked murmurs throughout the chamber. The bug-like aliens clicked with agitation. "You interfered with our evaluation process," their leader demanded. "I evaluated them the only way that really matters," Kelthus replied calmly. "Not by reading their written applications or listening to their speeches, but by watching their actions when they thought no one important was looking." The big chamber stayed very quiet as all the aliens tried to understand what Commander Kelthos had just told them. The most feared warrior in the entire galaxy had been secretly watching and testing humans for 5 whole years. Captain Morrison looked at Dr. Carter and Lieutenant Walsh. They were all thinking the same thing. What else had this powerful alien seen them do? Kelthus moved slowly around the center of the room. Even though he was huge and covered in battle scars, he moved like someone who was very careful not to hurt anything by accident. His footsteps made soft sounds on the metal floor. "You want to know what I really see when I look at human legends?" Kelthos asked, speaking to all the alien delegations at once. "I see the story of a species that has learned the hardest lesson in the universe. They have learned that sometimes the only way to keep peace is to be willing to fight for it." The robot aliens made loud worry and beeping sounds as their computers tried to process this idea. Their leader spoke in a flat, mechanical voice. "Arrow detected. Peace cannot be created through violence. This is a logical contradiction." "Is it really?" Kelthus asked, stopping right in front of the robot section. "Delegate Prime, your own people's greatest hero, Core Defender Prime. Did he not destroy the Chaos virus by using combat programs? Did he make peace by giving up to the virus or by fighting it with everything he had?" The robot alien's lights blinked on and off rapidly. This meant he was thinking very hard about the question. The situation was not the same. He finally answered. "How was it not the same?" Kelthus pressed. "Because the enemy was a computer virus instead of living creatures. Because you were fighting to save your entire species instead of fighting to take over someone else's land." The robot could not give a good answer. His lights kept blinking as he tried to find the right words. Kelthus turned away from the robots and looked at all the other aliens. "The humans understand something that all of you have forgotten during your long years of safe, comfortable peace. They understand that there are some things in the universe that are worth fighting for. There are some things that are worth dying for." The fish-like aliens in their water tanks began glowing with patterns that showed doubt. "You talk as if you have spent a great deal of time studying human behavior." "Commander, I have spent exactly 5 years studying them," Kelthos said. "Ever since Earth first asked to join our alliance, I have been watching how humans act. I have seen how they respond when bad things happen. I have watched how they treat people who are weaker than they are. I have observed the choices they make when nobody is telling them what to do." Dr. Carter felt brave enough to ask another question. What kinds of things did you observe us doing, Commander? Kelthus looked at her with his tired, wise eyes. I observed many things that surprised me. Let me tell you about some of them. He began walking again as he talked. I watched what happened when the big mining operation on Titan had a catastrophic failure in their oxygen systems. The accident happened very suddenly. Poisonous gas was leaking into the air that the miners needed to breathe. The situation was extremely dangerous. Captain Morrison had heard about the Titan incident. It had been all over the news back on Earth. Many people had called it one of the worst mining accidents in human history. The other human colonies near Titan had a choice to make. Kelthos continued. They could evacuate only their own people and leave the miners to die. This would have been the safe thing to do, the smart thing to do, the logical thing to do. The crystal alien Vorthok made small ringing sounds. What did they choose? They chose to send rescue ships into the radiation field around Titan. Answered. The radiation was so strong it could kill anyone who stayed in it too long. The rescue mission put hundreds of healthy people at risk to save only 67 miners who were already dying. The chamber was completely silent. Even the usual humming sounds of the life support systems seemed quieter. There was no profit to be made from this rescue, Kelthos said. There was no strategic advantage to be gained. The miners were not important political figures. They were just ordinary working people. But the humans sent ship after ship into that deadly radiation because they believed that no person should be left behind to die alone. Lieutenant Walsh felt his chest swell with pride. He had not known all the details of the Titan rescue, but now he understood why people back on Earth had talked about it with such respect. I also observed that humans, when their research station on Europa made an incredible discovery, Kelth continued. Deep under the ice of that moon, they found a completely new form of life. These creatures had never been seen before anywhere in the galaxy. The glowing aliens called ethereals began pulsing with interesting colors. New life forms were always exciting to scientists throughout the galaxy. The humans could have kept this discovery secret, Kelthus said. They could have studied these new life forms and used what they learned to make themselves more powerful. They could have sold the information to the highest bidder. They could have used it to gain advantage over other species. Dr. Carter knew what was coming next, but she let the great warrior continue his story. Instead, the humans immediately created protection rules for the new life forms. They made sure the creatures would not be hurt or disturbed by the research. Then they sent invitations to scientists from 6 different alien species, asking them to come and help with the study. They shared their discovery freely with everyone who was interested. The bug-like aliens clicked among themselves. This was not what they expected to hear about the supposedly violent human species. But I have seen even more than this, Kelthos said, his voice growing stronger. I have seen humans make choices that cost them dearly, choices that helped others while hurting themselves. Captain Morrison was getting more and more curious. Commander, you said you were present during these events. How is that possible? We never saw you there. For the first time since he had started speaking, Kelthus smiled. It was not a big smile, but it was definitely there. Captain Morrison, my species has many abilities that others do not know about. We can change our appearance when necessary. We can make ourselves look like other species when we need to observe without being noticed. This revelation shocked everyone in the room. The idea that the galaxy's greatest warrior could disguise himself as other species was both amazing and a little frightening. I have walked among humans as a human, Kelthus continued. I have worked alongside them, eaten with them, and listened to their conversations when they thought they were talking only to each other. I have seen them at their best and at their worst. The robot aliens were making rapid calculating sounds. Query: what was your assessment of human behavior during these covert observations? My assessment, Kelthus said, is that humans are remarkable, not because they are perfect, but because they consistently try to be better than they are required to be. He stopped walking and stood in the exact center of the chamber. I have lived for over 200 years. I have fought in more wars than any other being in this galaxy. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations create great wonders and commit terrible crimes. In all that time, I have learned to recognize something very rare and very precious. "What is that?" asked Vorthok. "The willingness to sacrifice for strangers," Kelth replied. "Most species will fight to protect their own families, their own clans, their own worlds. This is natural and expected. But humans will risk their lives for people they have never met, simply because those people need help." The aquatic alien's light patterns shifted to show deep thought. "Are you saying that humans are naturally more altruistic than other species?" "I am saying that they have made altruism into a choice rather than an instinct," Kelthos answered. "Their legends do not teach them that they are born to be heroes. Their legends teach them that they can choose to become heroes when the situation demands it." The great warrior looked around at all the alien delegations, and that choice, that decision to stand up when others would sit down, to help when others would walk away, to fight when others would surrender, that choice is exactly what this galaxy needs. The tension in the big chamber was so thick that Captain Morrison felt like he could almost touch it. Every alien delegate was hanging on every word that Commander Kelthos spoke. The great warrior stood in the center of the room like a mountain that could not be moved. "You want to understand what human legends really teach?" Kelthos asked, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "Let me tell you about a legend that is being written right now. A legend that you have never heard before." Dr. Carter looked at Captain Morrison with confusion. They had given the Council every major story and legend from human culture in their application. What could Kelthos know that they did not? 3 months ago, Kelthos began. A human cargo ship called the Meridian was traveling through the neutral zone. This is the area of space between different alien territories where no one species has control. The Meridian was a small ship with only 8 crew members. Lieutenant Walsh leaned forward slightly. He was curious about where this story was going. The Meridian detected a distress signal. Kelthos continued. The signal was coming from a Zephyrian science vessel that had been badly damaged by an asteroid impact. The science ship was in terrible trouble. The crystal alien Vorthok began to pulse with agitated light. His crystal body made small, ringing sounds. That incident was supposed to be kept secret. He said Kelthos ignored the interruption and kept telling his story. The Zephyrian science vessel was not just carrying equipment and supplies. It was carrying 23 young Zephyrians on their very first mission into deep space. These were children who had never been far from their home world before. The chamber became even quieter than before. Captain Morrison could feel that something very important was about to be revealed. The captain of the Meridian was a man named Pete Rogers, Kelthos said. He was 42 years old and had been flying cargo ships for 15 years. Back on Earth, he had a wife named Susan and 2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy was 8 years old, and the girl was only 5. Dr. Carter wondered how could know such personal details about a cargo ship captain. Captain Rogers was carrying medical supplies that were desperately needed by a human colony. Kelthos continued. The colony was dealing with a disease outbreak. If the medical supplies did not arrive on time, many people would die. The ship was already running behind schedule because of bad weather at their last stop. The alien warrior paused for a moment, letting this information sink in. Then he continued with his story. Captain Rogers had 2 choices when he heard the distress signal. He could continue to his destination and report the incident to the proper authorities. This would be the correct procedure according to space law. The Zephyrian ship would eventually be found and rescued by their own people. Lieutenant Walsh could see where this was heading, and it made him feel nervous. Or, Kelthos said, Captain, Rogers could change his course to help the Zephyrian ship himself, but doing this would mean his medical supplies would arrive too late to save the people in the colony who were sick. The weight of this choice hung over the chamber like a heavy cloud. Every alien present understood what kind of decision this was. Save strangers or save your own people. Captain Rogers made his choice in less than 30 seconds, Kelthos said. He ordered his crew to change course immediately and prepare for emergency rescue operations. The crystal alien Vorthok's body had gone completely still. No light pulsed through his crystalline form at all. For the next 18 hours, Kelthos continued. Those 8 humans worked in conditions that would have killed most other species. The damaged Zephyrian ship was leaking radiation and poisonous gases. The artificial gravity was failing, which meant people and objects were floating around dangerously. Captain Morrison found himself holding his breath as he listened to the story. The humans had to work in heavy protective suits that made movement difficult. They could only work for 30 minutes at a time before the radiation became too dangerous. Then they had to rest for an hour before going back to work. Kelthus began walking slowly around the center of the chamber as he spoke. They improvised repairs using spare parts from their own ship. They jury-rigged life support systems using equipment that was never designed to work together. And one by one, they manually carried each of the 23 young Zephyrians to safety. The aliens had stopped clicking entirely. Even their usual nervous movements had ceased. Some of the young Zephyrians were injured. Some were unconscious from breathing poisonous gas. The humans gave them medical care, even though they were not trained doctors. They shared their own food and water, even though they did not know how long the rescue would take. Dr. Carter felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she tried not to let them show. When the rescue was finally complete, Keltha said, Captain Rogers and his crew were exhausted. They had worked for 18 hours straight with only short breaks. Their ship was damaged from giving up so many spare parts, and they were now 2 days behind schedule. The aquatic aliens' bioluminescent patterns had shifted to colors that suggested deep emotion. Commander, Captain Morrison said quietly, what happened to the medical supplies? Kelthus stopped walking and looked directly at the human captain. They arrived too late. He said simply, 17 humans died in the colony because the medicine came 2 days after they needed it. The impact of these words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several aliens made sounds of shock and dismay. Captain Rogers knew this would happen when he made his choice. Kelthos continued. His computers had calculated the exact delay that the rescue would cause. He knew that changing course to save 23 alien children would mean that 17 of his own people would die. Lieutenant Walsh felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The magnitude of the choice that Captain Rogers had made was almost impossible to understand. But he made that choice anyway. Said he chose to save 23 children from another species instead of 17 adults from his own species. He chose to help strangers instead of helping his own people. The chamber was so quiet that the only sounds were the soft hums and whirs of the life support systems. This is the legend being written about humans right now, Kelthus said, his voice filled with something that sounded like admiration. Not a story about violence or conquest or glory. Not a tale about defeating enemies or winning battles. This is a story about sacrifice. He looked around at all the alien delegations. Captain Rogers will never be famous like the warriors in your ancient legends. His name will not be remembered in songs or poems. Most humans will never even know what he did. But he and his crew did something that day that shows the true nature of humanity. Dr. Carter's voice was barely a whisper when she asked, "What does it show?" "It shows that humans choose to be heroes," Kelthus replied. "Not because they are stronger than other species, not because they are smarter or more advanced, but because when they are faced with the choice between safety and service, between self-interest and sacrifice, they choose to stand for something greater than themselves." The great warrior's scarred face showed an expression that was both sad and proud. They choose to save others even when it costs them everything. They choose to help even when helping hurts them. They choose to stand up even when standing up means they might fall. Kelthus turned to face the Zephyrian delegation directly. "Ambassador Vorthok, would you like to tell the council who those 23 young Zephyrians were?" Vorthok's crystal form flickered with what could only be described as shame. When he spoke, his voice was much quieter than before. "They were students from our most prestigious academy. Among them was my own daughter." The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The alien who had been most critical of human legends had been personally saved by human sacrifice. "Your daughter is alive today because 8 humans chose to risk everything for strangers," Kelthus said. "That is what human legends really teach. That is what their stories really mean." The great chamber stayed completely silent after Kelthus finished his story about Captain Rogers and the Zephyrian rescue. The weight of what he had revealed pressed down on everyone like a heavy blanket. Ambassador Vorthok's crystal body had become so dim that he was barely visible in his section. Commander Kelthus continued to move slowly around the center of the chamber. Each step he took seemed to echo in the silence. His battle-scarred face showed both sadness and determination as he prepared to speak again. You laugh at their legends of people who stand against impossible odds, he said, his deep voice reaching every corner of the room. But I have watched them live, those legends, not in great battles or famous wars, but in quiet moments when they think nobody important is watching them. The glowing aliens called ethereals began pulsing with uncertain patterns of light. Their spokesman finally spoke. Commander, are you really suggesting that we should let a species join the Alliance based on a few acts of kindness? Even if these stories are true, they are just isolated incidents. Kelthus stopped walking and looked directly at the ethereal section. I am suggesting that you should let them join because they are the only species I have met in my 200 years of life that consistently chooses to be better than they have to be. He turned to address the entire assembly of aliens. I have fought alongside most of the species in this room. I have also fought against many of you. I have seen civilizations when they were at their best and when they were at their worst. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen the birth of new ideas and the death of old ones. I have witnessed more triumph and tragedy than any being should have to see. Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that this powerful warrior had seen so much history made him feel very small. In all that time, Kelthus continued, I have learned one basic truth about the universe. Strength is not measured by the ability to destroy things. Real strength is measured by the willingness to protect and preserve things. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to do the right thing even when you are afraid. And honor is not about winning victories. Honor is about having integrity when you make choices. Lieutenant Walsh found himself standing up straighter as he listened to these words. They reminded him of why he had wanted to join the space service in the first place. The humans have a saying that I find very wise, Kelthos said. They say that heroes are not born, they are made. They are forged in the moments when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things. The robot aliens made processing sounds as they tried to understand this concept. Their leader spoke in his flat, mechanical voice. Query, are you stating that humans are superior to other species in the galaxy? No, Kelthos said firmly. I am stating that they are necessary. Every species in this alliance has become very comfortable in their own specializations. You have all become experts in your own particular skills, but you have forgotten how to adapt to new situations. He began pointing to different sections of the chamber as he spoke. The Zephyrians have become masters of crystal technology, but they have forgotten how to change when their environment changes. The Aquatics have created perfect underwater civilizations, but they struggle when they have to deal with problems on dry land. The Mechanicals have achieved perfect logical thinking, but they have lost touch with intuition and emotion. The aliens he mentioned began making uncomfortable sounds. Nobody likes to hear about their weaknesses. The insectoids have perfected group cooperation, but they cannot handle situations that require individual initiative, Kelthos continued. The ethereals have mastered energy manipulation, but they have become too removed from physical reality to solve practical problems. Dr. Carter realized what the great warrior was building toward. Each species had become so specialized that they had lost the ability to handle unexpected challenges. The humans are different, Kelthos said. They are generalists. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They're not the smartest. They are not the most technologically advanced, but they are the most adaptable. They are the most willing to sacrifice for others, and they are the most capable of growth and change. He stopped in the center of the chamber and spread his arms wide. They are what this alliance needs. The bug-like insectoid representative began clicking nervously, but their legends speak of individuals who never give up, who never surrender. Is this not potentially dangerous to galactic peace? It is potentially our salvation, Kelthus replied, his voice growing stronger. Because someday, something will come for all of us. Something that cannot be reasoned with. Something that cannot be bought off or negotiated with. Something that cannot be avoided or ignored. When that day comes, you will want humans standing beside you. The chamber had become so quiet that Captain Morrison could hear his own breathing. Not because they are the strongest fighters, continued, but because they are the ones who will still be standing when everyone else has given up and fallen down. He turned to face the human delegation directly. Captain Morrison, Dr. Carter, Lieutenant Walsh, Your species has asked to join the Galactic Alliance, but I believe the Alliance needs you more than you need us." The crystal alien Vorthox form flickered with confusion and uncertainty. "Commander, this is very unusual. You are asking us to admit a species based on what they might do in the future rather than what they have already proven they can do. I am asking you to admit them based on their character," Kelthus corrected. "And I am not asking." His voice carried a subtle but clear warning. "I am telling you that if you reject humanity's application today, you will be making the greatest mistake in the history of this alliance." The chamber fell silent once more. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. The greatest warrior in the galaxy had just told them exactly what he thought they should do. Very few beings were brave enough to disagree with Commander Kelthus. Finally, the ethereal delegate spoke. Their light patterns had shifted to colors that suggested deep thought and consideration. "If the most respected warrior in the galaxy believes we should trust them, perhaps we should listen to his advice." The aquatic aliens' bioluminescent patterns changed to show agreement. The robot aliens' lights began blinking in patterns that meant they were updating their calculations. Even the insectoids had stopped their nervous clicking. One by one, each alien delegation began to voice their agreement. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Every single species voted to accept humanity into the Galactic Alliance. As the formal acceptance was recorded into the Alliance records, Kelthos approached the human delegation up close. Captain Morrison could see that despite his frightening appearance, the alien warrior's eyes held something that looked very much like hope. "Welcome to the Alliance," Kelthus said quietly, extending his huge hand toward Captain Morrison. Dr. Carter smiled and reached out to shake the great warrior's hand in the traditional human gesture of friendship. "We will do our best to live up to our legends, Commander." As Kelthos accepted the handshake, Captain Morrison thought he could see something that might have been a smile beneath the alien warrior's scarred features. "I believe you will," he said. "After all, you already have." In the months that followed, humanity's integration into the Galactic Alliance went very smoothly. They brought with them not just their technology and scientific knowledge, but also their stories, their values, and their strong belief that sometimes standing up and fighting for what is right is the only choice worth making. The real legends continued to be written every day, in the actions of ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things, in the decisions made when nobody important was watching, in the simple truth that sometimes the greatest strength comes from being willing to be gentle and kind. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really meant when they said that heroes were made, not born. And Commander Kelthos, the greatest warrior who had ever lived, watched with satisfaction as the newest members of the Alliance began to teach everyone else what their legends truly meant. Years later, when new threats did come to challenge the Alliance, the other species would remember this day. They would remember the words of their greatest warrior, and they would be grateful that humans had chosen to stand beside them when the darkness came.